Texas Rangers vs. Comanche Warriors, Agua Dulce Creek, ambush, 1850. The soldiers watched in stunned silence. As the man held it high, a severed head, a grotesque trophy from the night before. Even the battle-hardened Texas Rangers turned away in disgust. The blood on their hands was fresh, but the true consequences of that night were only beginning. The Comanche would not let this go unanswered. What happened in the days that followed would forever mark the men who survived. Join us as we uncover the brutal truth. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories. For the full story, on May 29, 1858, miles northwest of what is now Alice, Texas, Captain John Ripford led his company of Texas Rangers along a branch of the Nueces River. Their destination was their headquarters at San Antonio Viejo, near the U.S.-Mexico border on the Rio Grande. The men rode in formation, rifles ready, eyes constantly scanning the mesquite thickets that could conceal Comanche warriors. Captain Ford had just celebrated his 35th birthday. His nickname, Rip, reportedly came from his habit of signing too many death notices while serving as a quartermaster during the Mexican-American War of 1846-1848. The Rangers under his command were mostly veterans of that conflict, all in their 20s and early 30s. Lieutenant Andrew Jackson Walker served as second in command. Benjamin H. Smith managed supplies and logistics. David Level was Ford's aide-de-camp, and Philip N. Luckett, a trained physician, served as surgeon. Despite their youth, each man carried the weight of considerable combat experience from the brutal engagements of the Mexican-American War. Among the Rangers rode William Gillespie, a relatively new recruit who had also served in the Mexican-American War. Gillespie came from a family with a respected position in Ranger history. His uncle, Robert Addie Addison Gillespie, had served with distinction alongside Ranger legends like Jack Hayes, Bigfoot Wallace, Samuel Walker, and Rip Ford himself. The elder Gillespie had died 4 years earlier, during the Battle of Monterey, on September 22, 1846. He was reportedly the first Ranger to breach the barricade of the fortress on Independence Hill, where he was shot in the torso and died the following day. William Gillespie had joined the Rangers, determined to honor his uncle's legacy by establishing his own reputation in combat against the Comanche. The Ranger Scout was a half-Comanche, half-Mexican man named Rocco Madrigal who spoke Spanish, English, and Comanche fluently. He knew the terrain near the Nueces River intimately and was rumored to possess an extraordinary sense of smell that could detect enemies from remarkable distances, a claim many Rangers privately doubted, but none dared challenge to his face. Despite their scouts' impressive skills, the Rangers had spent most of the previous fall fruitlessly pursuing elusive Comanche groups across South Texas. They hadn't encountered any Comanche for months, a source of mounting frustration for Ford, and especially for the younger, battle-hungry men like William Gillespie. The monotony of their patrol had been shattered 3 days earlier. On May 26, the Rangers were suddenly awakened by gunfire from one of their sentries. The target's shadowy figures, mounted on several of the Rangers' horses, galloping away from the herd. After the riders ignored commands to halt, the sentry fired, striking one rider in the torso and causing him to fall. Until sunrise, no Ranger left the camp's perimeter, fearing ambush in the darkness at dawn. They discovered a mortally wounded Comanche warrior, no more than 16 years old, lying where he had fallen. The young warrior revealed before dying that he and his companions had intended to steal horses to gain wealth and prestige within their tribe. After his death, the Rangers scouted the area thoroughly, but found no trace of his companions, who had escaped into the brush. Captain Ford immediately wrote dispatches, reporting the incident and requesting reinforcements. He selected Edward Burleson Jr., son of a former vice president of the Republic of Texas, to deliver the message to Fort Merrill, the nearest military installation. Burleson returned with troubling news. Fort Merrill's commander, Captain J.B. Plummer, had dismissed their concerns. despite the clear evidence of Comanche activity so close to the fort, Plummer seemed more annoyed about being disturbed by the Rangers' gunfire than concerned about potential danger. He reluctantly sent a small detachment of regular army soldiers back to the ranger camp with Berth. That night, one of the regular soldiers wandered around the camp, displaying the severed head of the dead Comanche as a trophy. The sight disgusted even the hardened Rangers. Ford immediately ordered the regular troops to leave, describing the man's actions as deranged and beneath the dignity of soldiers. "We fight when necessary, but we don't desecrate the dead," Ford told his men afterward. "That's not what Rangers do." Now 3 days later, as they continued southward, their eyes constantly scanned the brush and horizon for potential dangers. Many yearned to reach the relative safety of San Antonio Viejo, where they could rest behind sturdy walls and process the events of the past 72 hours with the help of strong whiskey. But their headquarters remained many miles upstream. And whether the Rangers knew it or not, there would be no respite from violence and danger in their immediate future. The death of the young Comanche warrior had set events in motion that couldn't be undone. In Comanche culture, such a death demanded vengeance. Somewhere in the vast expanse of South Texas, warriors were gathering, preparing to exact a blood price from the men who had killed one of their own. "Captain, you think they're out there watching us?" Gillespie asked, his hand resting on his Colt Walker revolver. Ford's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the terrain. "They're out there. The question isn't if they'll come for us, but when." The Rangers rode on through the heat of the day, each man lost in his thoughts. The horses' hooves kicked up dust that hung in the still air, marking their passage like a signal flag to anyone who might be watching. The mesquite thickets on either side of their path could hide dozens of warriors, and every ranger knew it for William Gillespie. The anticipation of combat brought both excitement and apprehension. He had joined the Rangers to build a reputation, like his uncles, but now with actual conflict looming. He felt the weight of mortality. Would he live up to his family name, or would he simply die trying? He straightened in his saddle, checking his weapons for the third time that hour. The column of Rangers continued south toward San Antonio Viejo, unaware that they were riding directly into one of the bloodiest confrontations between Texas Rangers and Comanche warriors in the history of the frontier. Their encounter with the young horse thief had been merely the opening move in a deadly game that would test every man's courage, skill, and will to survive. Though the Texas frontier was a vast, expansive territory not conducive to easy travel or communication, news traveled with surprising speed. Word of the young Comanche warrior's death quickly reached his tribe through the survivors of the failed raid on the Ranger encampment. The Rangers had inflicted a hard death on a beloved tribesman, and in Comanche culture, such an act demanded response. The Comanche, while often harsh and unremitting toward their enemies, maintained incredibly close family bonds, an unyielding sentimentality common among Plains tribes. Their ceremonial grieving process frequently involved self-mortification that could sometimes result in the death of the practitioner. More significantly, the Comanche operated by a principle of balanced retribution. Whatever degree they perceived themselves to have been aggrieved, they considered it their karmic duty to seek vengeance via an equal and opposite degree of violence. This cultural imperative meant that the Ranger's killing of the young warrior had triggered an unavoidable cycle of retaliation. The Rangers were acutely aware of the Comanche's propensity for combat. A tense anticipation pervaded their ranks. As they rode south, they had broken camp at dawn, and by mid-morning, their scout had spotted tracks of several unshot horses, a clear sign of a war party nearby. The hoofprints were fresh, indicating the Comanche riders had passed through the area only hours before. "These tracks are from this morning," Rocco reported, kneeling beside the impressions. "At least 12 warriors moving fast." Ford and his Rangers correctly surmised that the Comanche intended to cut off their path Fort Merrill was the only military installation on the oasis. Between their current location and their destination, the Comanche would have been aware of the Rangers' likely route and planned accordingly with mortal danger near at hand. Thoughts of relaxing in a border cantina or reposing in warm beds at San Antonio Viejo quickly vanished, replaced by the immediate demands of combat preparation. Their first engagement occurred shortly after Rocco's discovery. A small party of Comanche attackers, likely young braves on a reconnaissance mission, fired upon the Ranger formation from a mesquite thicket. Man down. Gillespie's hit someone, shouted. By 1850, the Texas Rangers, though only 15 years old as a formal organization, had already contributed significantly to advancements in firearm technology. The intervening time had seen the average Ranger outfitted first with single-shot pistols, then 5-shot Peterson Colt revolvers with removable cylinders, and now, the most recent iteration, the 1847 Walker Colt. Samuel Colt had first designed his revolving cylinder pistol in 1836. While he didn't invent the revolving cylinder concept, Colt's ambition was to bring the idea to its fullest fruition. Initially, commercial interest was minimal, but the burgeoning Republic of Texas became an early adopter in 1839. The Republic officially purchased 180 revolvers primarily for the Texas Navy, to combat pirates frequenting the coast and to defend against potential international incursions. When Governor Sam Houston disbanded the Texas Navy in 1843, the stockpile of unused revolvers became available for Texas's newest military experiment, the Texas Rangers. These Rangers, tracing their lineage to Stephen F. Austin's ranging companies of the 1830s, were a motley assemblage of combative and adventurous young men whom Texas employed as light-mounted cavalry. In the years that followed, both the Rangers and Colt's revolver would be tested through the refiner's fire of frequent and highly mobile combat engagements against cattle thieves, Mexican soldiers, and Comanche warriors. Colt developed a correspondence and eventual friendship with Ranger Samuel Walker, who provided crucial suggestions for improvements in letters, often written near the front lines. Walker, a Maryland native who arrived in Texas in 1842 via Galveston, had served under Captain Jesse Billingsley during an ill-fated invasion into Mexico, captured and held as a prisoner of war. He narrowly survived the infamous Black Bean incident. Upon returning to Texas, Walker enlisted with the Rangers. Through his experiences fighting Comanche, Kiowa, Apache, and in the Mexican-American War, he suggested several critical improvements, adding a fixed trigger guard, incorporating interchangeable parts for easier field repairs, and most significantly, adding a sixth chamber to the cylinder. The resulting Colt Walker revolver weighed 4.5 pounds, with a length of nearly 15 inches, firing a .44 caliber ball with an effective range of approximately 100 yards. It was essentially a handheld cannon by the standards of the time. Rip Ford, who had served alongside Walker through many campaigns, including the Battle of Veracruz, remarked that the pistol was more powerful than the Bond .54 caliber Mississippi rifle, after witnessing its lethality at distance in combat. "This isn't just a pistol," Ford had once told his men, while demonstrating the weapon. "This is the great equalizer. The Comanche can lose 6 arrows in the time it takes to reload a rifle, but with this we can fire 6 times without pause." The Rangers quickly adopted the new revolvers in 1847. Walker himself carried 2 into combat later that year, at the Battle of Wilmette, where on October 9, 1847, the young Ranger captain was shot and killed by a sniper. Though Walker had fallen, his legacy and the firearm he helped develop were keenly felt just over 2 years later on the New Aces River. Ford and the other veterans of the war, in which Walker perished, felt an extra measure of gratitude for his efforts. Now that they found themselves surrounded and far from home, the Walker cult enabled them to lay down a field of rapid fire that could overwhelm the rate of fire that the Comanche were capable of with their short high-draw-weight bows. The Comanche had long dominated the battlefield in terms of rate of fire and maneuverability, two key factors in any engagement. The horsemanship of the average Comanche warrior enabled him to fire while hanging off the side of his horse, protected from counterfire by the animal's body. He could loose arrows from over the horse's back, as well as under or over the horse's neck, all while shielding himself from counterattack. These skills weren't inherent to the Comanche. The difference lay in their lifestyle and training. Comanche children, both boys and girls, were taught to ride and shoot from an early age. Common practice drills involved picking up objects from the ground while riding at progressively faster speeds, as well as shooting live birds out of the air with blunted arrows for target practice. By adulthood, these skills were second nature, making Comanche warriors some of the most formidable light cavalry in the world. But the Rangers, despite their reputation as an ad hoc assemblage of killers for hire, were in fact disciplined, drilled professionals. They were not only superb horsemen but incredibly accurate marksmen while mounted, as well as sound small group tacticians. The Rangers were well armed and mounted on some of the finest horses in Texas. A prospective ranger wasn't allowed to join the ranks. With a horse valued at less than $100, approximately $3,900 in today's currency. The Rangers were indeed known for their decided lack of military discipline. In dress and decorum, they were free to wear what pleased them, from wide-brimmed hats and to buckskin leggings and coonskin caps. But in combat, they were highly disciplined, highly mobile, and highly dangerous. In 1850, they were essentially the only military force capable of engaging the Comanche on equal terms. The ambush at Agua Dulce Creek. After their initial skirmish near Rancho Amig, Ford ordered his men into skirmish lines, spaced a few yards apart, Colt Walker revolvers drawn and ready. They moved as quietly as possible, communicating via either hand signs or in hushed tones. The Rangers traveled another 4 miles up the oasis before coming within sight of the Comanche camp near Agua Dulce Creek. The Comanche, who had attacked them earlier, had disappeared to the north, and had evidently not yet returned to their camp to sound the alarm about the Rangers' approach. This delay meant Ford's men possessed the element of surprise, and the captain sought to use that advantage to its fullest extent. With Ford leading the charge,